So I am Jim Bruner. I am the future farmer and alpha animal at Mezzacello Urban Farm. And Mezzacello Urban Farm, it's going to make you think of something agricultural and out in the country and lovely. It is not. My main predators are raccoons, falcons and hawks that live on the skyscrapers of downtown Columbus, just 10 blocks from my farm. And I live 15 blocks from the state capitol. And Columbus is the 13th largest city in the United States. So it's not a hick town, but I wanted to prove that we can show children and people who are potentially going to grow up living on the moon, Mars, or in large megalopolises across this entire planet, that we can work with nature, not against her. And so I founded Mezzacello in 2017, and now this is what I do, and it's my passion. And today we are going to be talking about the future of food, water, fish, robotics, and energy in a built urban environment. And so if you would mind, I will share my screen. So this is my presentation on water, fish, robots, data, and the future of food. And to the right, you can see one of the robotic images from the shark bot in my pond at Mezzacello. And that's me. That's my caricature of myself. And the circle is supposed to be a helmet, but I did it today. It's not the best, it's not my best work. I can do better. But this is the way we see the underwater life at Mezzacello, because of course we live in an environment that has molecular air in an atmosphere between the planet and the vacuum of space. These guys live between our atmosphere and the molecularized oxygen and water. So I hope you find that funny. If not, well, I'm a nerd. This is me. I had this one in my presentation before. This is me preparing for the spring and summer camps at Mezzacello, which is my primary thing that I do. I train young people to be leaders, ecologists, engineers, and inventors. So we're going to be talking about ecosystem number 5 at Mezzacello. There are 10 in total. Ecosystem number 5 is a pond that I installed at Mezzacello. This is a gentleman I hired to help me engineer the pond. His name is Zach, and he is doing a 3-dimensional scan of basically the big hole we dug in the ground, and we lined with rubber and filled with 4,893 liters of water, or about 2,000 gallons US of water. This is the pond 2 years ago, dirty. It's filled with algae. I had just brought online my water purification system. And the 4th image is when I added robots to the water. And the 3rd image, I should say. The 4th image is what I pull out of the water every week using these robots. That's recycled bioproducts, mostly nitrates, bacteria, and algae. This is the result of this past week's camp. We introduced a new fish to the pond that came with a bacteria which is called ick. It's a pathogen, and it blocks their gills. So the kids found this fish, and they made a tombstone, and they interred Timmy, which they called after the Charles Dickens novel, A Christmas Carol, Little Tim, Tiny Tim, I should say. And they made a tombstone for him and buried him in my carrots. Nothing goes to waste at Mezzacello. Atoms, elements, molecules, substances, nothing goes to waste. And this is the funeral. It was a very somber affair. Why sustainability? Because I'm passionate about it. And I'm mostly passionate about it, Nicole, and everyone watching on YouTube, because I learned about it through GIFT 2 years ago. I did not know what the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals were until I saw a group of kids introducing it to me. And then I started researching it, and now it occupies all of my imagination. So what is the role of ecosystem number 5, or the aquatic ecosystem, at Mezzacello? It's like the design cycle that Susie and Warren were talking about, except in this case, it is nature. We start with water, we add life, then filtration, pull out the waste, reuse them, create new growing mediums or fertilizers. We improve the soil and grow food, and start with water again. Okay, so what does this have to do with robots and data? So I showed you that picture earlier of Zach scanning the pond. We also actually had the police called on us because I do live in downtown Columbus, and we were digging a 6-foot hole or a 1.8 meter hole in our yard. And the police showed up and said, "What are you doing?" And we said, "Well, we're using infrared scanners to figure out exactly what the surface area of this is going to be, so we don't buy more rubber than we need." And this is what it looks like. This is what a 3D scan of a large hole in the ground looks like. And you can see the gradations from shallow to not so shallow to less shallow to very deep. That deepest hole is 1.8 meters. And it's designed for a reason, so that the water never freezes at those last two areas. Because we do live in the North American continent, and in the winter, our water does freeze at surface level. We designed a robot that lives in that third area of the pond, and it has a camera attached to it, and it also has a shroud that we can change out when algae starts to grow around it, so we always get clean images. And this middle image is the image that the robot actually sees. And we do have the ability to move the robot. We don't do it a lot because it does startle the fish when suddenly that fish that never moves. So, we train the fish through a gradual week that this robot's going to move. Don't freak out. And this is what it looks like. The third image is what it looks like in my classroom through telemetry and Bluetooth of what that robot is actually seeing as it swims through the fish. And fish, koi in particular, catfish not so much, but koi in particular are incredibly curious, and they swim up to the shark bot because they want to know what it is. And we want them to do that because that's how we test and we know if they are infected. We can look at their gills and check their scales and see if they're pregnant. It's a really sophisticated system. And the fourth system is a data center that we put together, powered by solar panels, protected by the wind and water by that overhang, of kids monitoring data that the SharkBot is sending them on pH, water temperature, pressure, sunlight, and what the electrical resistivity and the parts per million of the water are to monitor health. So what algae robots and sustainability makes at Mezzacello? Well, first, of course, they make water, plants, and other fish. They make algae, water, nitrogen, bacteria, and microbes that we pull out. We further synthesize that into water, solvents, excess plants, and other materials, raw materials, to make 8 different kinds of liquid fertilizers and 5 different kinds of substrates that we can add to the soil to make the soil grow more food. So everything in ecosystem number 5 feeds into all the other 5 ecosystems at Mezzacello, not just the water, everything. So this is the harvest from this week at the farm. All of the vegetables that are trending right now. We have 200% more growing space on the same acreage of land because of ecosystem number 5, the pond, and all the algae and materials, biomaterials that we pull out. And it's all powered by young inventors, the sun, the wind, and rain. And the latest, which I just presented this at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. I'm not sure what Greenwich Mean Time on that is, but on how those forest floor growing beds actually work. But they model what the pond ecosystem is doing at the bottom of a 4 cubic meter growing bed. And it all grows life. This is what it looks like from the pond when I'm standing there looking at the data monitor for the SharkBot. This is what I see. All of this comes from that pond. So a study in contrasts here. The first image is the pond that's dirty. The second image is the pond as we added the robots and started the nucleation product or process from the Baki shower and the bioreactor and, biofilter and UV filtering system. The third image is what that pond looked like this morning. You can see those fish cleanly, and you can see all the work I have to do after my thumb heals when I go to the bottom of that pond and clean out that basically 18 centimeters of muck that's developed there that will be worth its weight in gold, because you already know I can pull all of the reactants and algae out and turn it into sellable products. That stuff at the bottom of the pond is going to pay for all the solar panels I'm going to add this year at Mezzacello, because it's so just sustainable and viable, and it makes so much biomaterial that people want and need. They don't know they need it until I tell them they need it, and then they do. So this is the promise and the power of technology, and why I'm so passionate about applying it at Mezzacello and teaching kids to make this. This is what it looked like today when I dropped the SharkBot back into the water after our tune-up. The fish came running to it because they're curious, just like children and just like we are about what we're doing here. They're curious and they want to know more. And the only way to be curious is to look. So what is a technology farm? I know everyone's saying, what is that? Well, it's a farm that makes food and technology. And the technology systems that I make are both dirty hand and clean hand technologies. Because again, Summer's on the left. She loves to get her hand dirty and she wants to be a vet and an entrepreneur and an engineer. And this is Caden. He hates spiders. He does not like muck. He does not like fish or anything slimy. He's fascinated by computers and data and technology. I need them both. So I created an environment that makes a safe place for them to interact with each other and encourage each other, which is what the future is. It's working together. And I always get this question, so I started adding these slides in, Julie. Why the name Mezzacello? And everyone wants to say cello, or it's cello, but they say cello or cello. It's Mezzacello, just like Monticello. But I couldn't name it after my hero, Thomas Jefferson, because one, that's a copyright violation and a violation of the First Amendment right to free speech and identity that's promised in the US Constitution, which Thomas Jefferson wrote. But I love his idea. So we cut it in half, and instead of Monta, it's Mezza, which in Italian means half. So it's half of what Thomas Jefferson wanted to do, but with 200% more technology and a lot more work. I don't have people that do things for me. I do them. And the goal is to be the change we want to see in the world. We want new ecologists and engineers. We want to grow them. We want to show them how to maintain the planet they have, how to sustain the planet and environment they live in, and how to explain it to others to be that change agent. And do we have any questions? Caden wants to know. That's my presentation. 20 minutes.
I have a question.
Great. What's your question,
Oh,
Nicole?
that was a really cool. I love your farm, and it's amazing. And I just have one question. I have a question that, like, how do you keep your fish from freezing? Do you have like a heater or something?
I do. It's the reaction between the sun, the moon pulling tidally on the mantle underneath the earth, and the core of the earth itself. Because anything below 1 meter won't freeze. My pond is 1.8 meters deep. The water stays liquid. I don't have to do anything. I designed it that way because I understand how nature works and what she needs and what those fish need. And that one modification, making my pond 1.8 meters deep, solves so many problems. In the winter, because in North America, this atmosphere does freeze between the months of November and March. Fish stay alive, but more importantly, when the water is liquid, the falcons and the hawks that live on the skyscrapers, 8 blocks to the west of me, they can't dive and get the fish. The fish can go down. The raccoons can't reach them. The cranes that are flying overhead that look for that pattern of swimming fish, they can't get them. And that water sustains an ecosystem of plants that hide the fish anyway. So the fish have some place to mate on the roots of those plants. The fish produce effluent and feces, literally, that make the plants grow faster. The sun warms the water and the earth keeps the water warm in the winter. That's what an ecosystem does. It works with all aspects of its component architecture to make life viable. What humans produce are not ecosystems. They are just systems. Ecosystem takes all frames of life into account and makes it as convenient as possible for all of them. And we haven't even touched on the species that depend on this pond that have nothing to do with the pond. The birds who live in my trees, who eat the predators, who scare the predators away from nests that they lay in the trees that grow because the water from that pond made those trees possible. The pollinators that fly in to land on those plants and get water. The other animals that make life possible on my farm, the microorganisms that come on the feces of birds flying by that land, the worms that come up from the water that I put into my gardens and better propagate my soil and make my soil livable, friable, and habitable. This pond is not only interdependent, but it makes life possible just by existing in the way that it exists. Nature designed things so that it's a wheel, not a spoke. So that's why the water doesn't freeze and why the fish live. If I weren't there to take these nutrients out of the water, what would nature do? What do you think nature would do, Nicole, to that pond that just never emptied? They would kill it. I am the stream that goes out of that water. All the energy I put into this pond is developed by solar and wind energy that I develop with my solar array and vertical access wind farm powered by wind and traffic, because I do live in a downtown metropolis. So I don't need to do anything but connect those two resources together and the earth itself to make magic happen. But I had to design it and I had to understand it so I could take advantage of the nexus of those three things that I have access to. Does that answer your question? It was kind of a long answer.
Yes, that answered it. Thank you. And I have one more question. What type of fish do you use?
3, the SharkBot does more than one thing. The SharkBot is also its own pump that quickly flows water through to create a current. So I'm able to raise tilapia, which is a fish that I eat, but can't live in still water because it evolved in the Nile River, which has a very fast current. And if I had, and I did, put tilapia in water without a current, and they all drowned. So I had to learn from that. So the SharkBot also creates a current in the bottom of my pond. So I raise catfish that live below the current, tilapia that live in the current, and circling around the current are koi, frogs, and other amphibious life, dragonflies, hummingbirds, you name it, but no mosquitoes because that water is always turning. And especially when you get underneath, and you'll see it, if I ever have the opportunity to show this SharkBot swimming through, you'll see when the SharkBot hits what I call my micro Labrador current, and it starts spinning because that's where the tilapia swim. But yeah, so 3 different species of fish and several different species of amphibians live in that aquatic ecosystem number 5 at Mezzacello. And I harvest 2 of them for food, tilapia and catfish. I literally fish for them.
Wow. Thank you so much.
I might build a robot that will catch them for me. I'm sure I could do it, but I hadn't been top of my priority. First on my priority is save the planet. Second is teach the kids to do this. Third is make it easier to catch tilapia.
So I had a quick question. I tried to feed it to Nicole, but I think she was being very polite and thought I was going to ask it. But do you ever have an overpopulation problem with your fish?
Yes.
What do you do? Do you let it resolve itself naturally, or do you have to take some out and give them away, or
Option
whatever
B.
you do to them?
Option B.
I'm sorry?
Option
Okay.
B. So what we do is we take carbon dioxide and we put it in a container and we put it into a hose at the bottom of the pond, 2 of them, and those hoses create very large bubbles. And then we take a net and we run it down over what's called a send net, and all the fish swim on. And when we turn the carbon dioxide on, they get scared and swim to the top, and we just lift the net. And we have almost all the fish, and we just filter them out. Nature introduces apex predators to take care of them, but this is an enclosed ecosystem. I am the apex predator. So we keep the ones we want, sell the ones we don't, eat the ones we need. We do it
Alright.
twice a week.
I have a question, actually, if there's a little bit of time.
Yep.
I really liked your succinct explanation about grow, maintain, sustain, explain. I thought that was really very clear and very succinct. And I was interested in, where do the students go and explain their activities and what they're doing? Do they do that in their schools, or is there a community stage where they can do that?
Yes, yes, and yes. When I train kids here, their obligation is not only to be my interns, because I do have 9 to 13-year-old kids who come back every year who are my teachers. They teach, I teach them. It's an ecosystem. But one of the obligations is that they have to do at least 2 public speaking events each year, where they either talk to their school or talk on behalf to some organization. Like in America, we have organizations called the Lions Club or the Kiwanis. They have to explain what they're doing, or they have to invent something that we can use here at Mezzacello, test, and then share out. Because everything on my website, which is mezzacello.org, is free. And that's how I go about doing that. I create ecosystems of young, talented teachers and speakers that want to carry my mission forward. And it's the only way I know how to safely, conveniently, and with dignity replicate ecosystems. That's a long way.
Another wonderful presentation. Anybody that's interested in the stuff that Jim is doing, which should be everybody, should go back and look at some of the other presentations he's done over time, and look at the growth each time that he's come back with something. There's always something new that he's doing, and some new technology he's using. Not all of it's new technology. Some of it's just applying old-fashioned things from wisdom that he's learned elsewhere too. Very cool. Very excited.
On to a week.
All right.
Thank you.
Jim, thank you.